Uh, Hi, Pravin. Hi, Pravin.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, folks. So we are just about to begin. So uh, sorry about the delay. We had some issues with our microphones here. They were not charged. So I think we have managed to sort it out. Hello, everyone. Sorry about the delay in starting. Our mics were not charged, as you can imagine. So there is some food in the back, so people are helping themselves. So please do feel free to grab something to eat before you sit down. My name is Praveen Kolguri. I am one of the organizers from India Labor Solidarity Collective, which is based in the UK. And thank you so much for joining us for this important discussion where we are going to be discussing about persecution of minority tribals and reclaiming rights and justice in Manipur. And this event is co-organized by India Labour Solidarity, now UK, and also UK as supported by SOAS Black Panther Society. So that's the reason why we are in SOAS today. And we also are supported by South Asian Solidarity Group, and UK Zafate here as well. So for people who are not aware of uh, this topic that we're going to talk about, this started in May 2023 when there was state-backed ethnic violence started. And the reasons why it has happened will be explained by our speakers better, but since it has happened, we have worked with now UK to raise awareness of this issue through events, through protests, and we had also had an early day motion which was signed in the UK Parliament by MPs. So we'll be taking some photos during the event today, and if you don't wish to be in the photos, then so please put it on yourselves. when the photos go out, but the photos will be mainly from the back, taking pictures of the speakers. So, yeah, I think I was just going to give you some overview of the day today. So we are very lucky that we are very joined by academics, activists, and community members who will give some more context on what is happening in Manipur and how we can support the victims there, and also basically the wider political struggles which are happening here in the UK and also in India, I guess. And with regards to India Labour Solidarity, we are an anti-caste collective based in the UK. We advocate for solidarities across global labour movements to focus on worker struggles in India and the UK, and we extend solidarity with people who are resisting colonialism, militarization, and as well as broader aspects of imperialism that perpetuate labour and climate injustices. So that's it from me. So I'll hand over to Hassani from SOAS Black Panther Society, who will be hosting the event and then introducing our speakers. So thank you very much, and we will hang out after the event as well, so there's plenty of time for questions and meeting us later as well. So thank you.
Hey guys, thank you for coming first. So we're gonna have a learn from one of our Subir Silva, who is part of the SOAS South Asia Institute, and we have people joining from home. Dr. Tara, who has personally experienced what's going on right now, and Professor Juan from University of Hyderabad. Do you want to join us? Is Dr. Tara with us?
Dr. Tara, I presume, is online.
Yeah, I'm online. Oh, I'm supposed to start. Voice is not clear.
Tara, could you try speaking?
Yeah, I think Uttara, you have to speak. You have to start speaking. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Good evening, folks. My name is Tara Manchin Hangso. I belong to a tiny state of Manipur, which is located in the northeastern region of India. My state, Manipur, share a porous international border with Myanmar. I used to live in Imphal city, the capital of Manipur, but now, due to the ethnic conflict of May 2023 between the majority Hindu Meitei and the minority Kuki Christian tribals, I and my entire family, are now displaced, like 50,000 others, and living outside of Manipur for 22 months now. I'm a Christian, tribal Adivasi minority woman, and the recent conflict in Manipur has rendered me homeless and stateless, which led me to doubt my credibility of being a bona fide Indian citizen, as I feel ignored, neglected, and invisible to my fellow Indian, the central government, and the world at large. I feel nobody is paying attention to our plight and suffering. To highlight our suffering as minority tribe of an obscure state of India, I wish to share with you all my horrific experience of what happened to me and countless others on the night of May the 3rd and 4th, 2023. May the 3rd will be forever etched in my memory as a day when Infal city lost all its humanity, when countless tribal minority were chased out of the home, the day when neighbors became enemies, the day we were uprooted from a home never to return, as our houses were burned down and razed to the ground and all properties looted and destroyed. Violence is not new to the people of Manipur, but this time the scale is unprecedented and magnified into manifold of human rights violation. My story. On the fateful night of May 3rd, at around 8 p.m., Meitei mob consisting of both men and women, young and old, enter a locality with bamboo sticks, kerosene jerrycans, and stones. They surge into the colony locality, shouting at the top of the voice, "Kill the cookies! Chase the cookie out of their home!" With this, we, while hearing this, we were hiding in a bedroom, covering in fear, not knowing what is happening. We do not know what is the next step or what to do. I tried calling up my police and my army friends to come and help rescue us, but with little assurance. The attack was so sudden, and we were taken unaware and by surprise. There was a lull 15 minutes after the first attack, and the police tear gas the crowd. They dispersed. But soon after, we hear the crowd screaming and yelling on top of the voice again. They seem high on drugs and alcohol. This time they said, "Burn homes and church." And sure enough, we saw our church on fire. More than 376 plus churches was burned and destroyed on 3rd and 4th May. Our church was one of them. Later, they burned more churches in Jiribam district as late as December 2024. Soon, our neighbor's newly constructed commercial shop was on fire. Our house was the next target. We all escaped after the mob entered our home, scaling the fence. The first thing they did was attack the parked cars with a bamboo stick, overturn and drag it outside the road and torch them. As they entered the compound of the house, we have to escape. I dragged my 87 years old mother and my handicapped sister through the broken glass and debris. We barely managed to escape through the back door of our brother's house to a hotel which was behind our house, owned and operated by a Meitei guy, thinking we'll be safer there. After taking shelter in the place for about an hour, we were told to vacate the hotel and move elsewhere. But in the meantime, the mob were systematically vandalizing houses one after another in our colony. Not knowing whether we will live or die, we prayed hard. 30 of us were led out of the hotel like an animal in a row onto the street. And as I left the hotel, I looked back and saw my brother's house in flame licking out from his windows, and tear came to my eyes, tears started flowing through my eyes, and I could feel the saltiness of the tears, though I could not see it. The people who came attacked who came to attack us came face to face with us, and we realized that they were our known neighbors and people from across the street and neighboring localities. Fortunately, the boys who let us out into the street knew us very well and did not harm us physically. My mother, being a Meitei, their community, was recognized by them. We are grateful we are not physically harmed or beaten. Later, we found out in the army camp that many were not so lucky like our family. We came out of a burning house with loud sound of car engine and gas cylinder bursting. Boom, boom, boom. With literally nothing, just the clothes on a bag, we came out. We were under the impression thinking we will be returning to a damaged home in a day or two, not knowing the reality. Meanwhile, our group, consisting of 22 immediate family members and some neighbors, my old mother, 1-year-old granddaughter suffering from chicken pox, and other children stood exposed on the street near the parked vehicle of the police personnel. There were just five of them against 500 or more a mob. We watched the mayhem unfolding before our eyes, feeling frightened and lost, not knowing where to go or how to escape. 1 hour in the street, feeling exposed and helpless, we begged the police to drop us to the army camp located near the airport. But instead, they took us to the police headquarters, and soon, within 5 minutes of arriving at the police headquarters, we were asked to leave because the police said they cannot guarantee the safety of our life. The head constable of the police took us to a kind lady's house, which is in Old Lambulin, a tribal locality. Her house was not under attack because she was under the protection of a local Meitei MLA. But ours was already attacked while her local locality was still safe. At around 3 a.m., with the help of the army, we were picked up and taken to safety and placed in the army unit, the Assam Rifle at Singzamay. We stayed at the army camp in a cram room, one room, for about 4 days and flew to Delhi, Guwahati, Bangalore, etc., to an unknown future as internally displaced people of Manipur. We did not have we did not change our clothes for 4 days as we had none. We did not take bath. We did not brush our teeth. Though food was provided, we barely ate. We have no access to medicine, so my mother, who's 88 years old, went without her BPA medicine for the 4 days, and the kids went without their diapers. Life for us underwent a 360-degree turn. We were at the mercy of God. We felt helpless and abandoned by the government. There was no word of encouragement from our chief ministers, and it was at that camp we realized that the mob who attacked us that night on 3rd May were actually the radicalized armed wing of the chief minister known as the Arambai Tengol. The following days, the 5th the 4th, the 5th, and 6th May, and consecutive these days, the mob looted, stole, and damaged our properties, destroying properties worth crores of rupees. 2,000 plus villages of the tribals were burned. 70,000 houses in Infal alone was burned down and razed. More than 50,000 people were displaced and scattered all over India, here and there. Terror was unleashed by the so-called radicalized militant group, the Rambai Tengol and Maitin Lipun, who took control of the state missionaries. They looted arms and created fear and mayhem since then. The whole terrible ordeal took 7 hours from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. The trauma from that night still haunt us. We are trying to pick up our life and make our life normal. As a displaced person, what I want is that we should have the world, the people of the world, the people in London, the people in UK, the people everywhere in the world should take cognitions of the suffering of the minority tribals of Manipur. Justice should be served. Peace should return to our state. And most important, a political solution should be provided to us as soon as possible. The people in the relief camp wants to go back to the home because home is where the heart is. So people should take pity on us and help us in while we are in dire strait. Thank you very much.
Hello, Tara, can you hear me?
I can hear. Hello?
Feedback. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback there.
I can hear you now. While my presentation was going on, can you all hear me?
Yes, we could hear.
I think if you mute it and if you unmute it, then
Yeah.
Hello. Alan, that was a very moving personal account. I'm firstly in solidarity with you, and I feel for you and the displacement and the threat to your identity that you faced in the recent months. I can't imagine that it would have been pleasant at all, not just because of the fact that you have a baby mother and small children with you, but also mainland Indian cities are not the most hospitable to people from Manipur and in fact people from the northwest. I'm ashamed as a person from Indian media. From the time I was in college in Delhi, for a long time ago, just the systematic nature of racism and discrimination that you have had to face with past several decades. As you know, I'm not from Manipur, I'm basically going to, I'm a historian and a political scientist. So I'd like to speak from that perspective and try to come more present. With respect to trying to frame issues that are going on in the northeast part of India. Now, the Indian nationalism is an unfinished project, and I don't think it can ever be finished in a way in which those who consider themselves to be nationalists would like it. There is not only too much diversity, but also as far as the regions of the northeast are concerned, particularly if you look at Manipur's own previous history, its accession to India, its signing of the principles of becoming a part of the Indian Union, they have been disputed from 1947 onwards. I believe it was August 11 of 1947 when the then king, on the advice of the British, signed the articles of accession. And very briefly, the entire idea of Manipur becoming a part of India was disputed from that moment onwards. You basically have a long history from that point onwards in which large numbers of people within the state disputed the authority of the king at that time. In terms of
I can't hear.
who cannot hear? Can they hear now? Okay, should I start from the beginning?
No. I think we'll have to put it from there only. We'll move that a little bit. Because from here now it's not catching.
Should I come there?
Then it'll still echo. That's the echoing.
Call them and keep the phone there so they can audio. You can call them or video call also.
Yeah, it's not catching the here, and if we put the mic on from there, then it's echoing very bad. No, it's just the sound.
So just call them and call so they can hear the voice.
Join on Zoom on someone's phone and they can just go.
Can you speak without the mic?
Can you hear me without the mic?
Yeah. So then put it on from there then.
Can they hear me without the mic? Okay. Mic off.
Take your phone away. Take your phone away.
Yeah.
बंद कर
Shall we try to? I think if you turn off the speaker there. Yeah.
Volume 0. This is like a physical connection. Even the horror movies of the 90s. Okay. How's it going now? Better? It is better. Yeah, Professor Swan is saying it's better. And there was no echo. Yeah. So that's because you're hearing my voice and that come down. But it's it's like a Pink Floyd song. Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah. Hearing anything? Yes, looks better, he says. Yeah, okay. So, what I was saying just before we got interrupted was that the entire question of Manipur's accession to India and becoming a part of India was disputed from that very moment, from the 1950s and 1960s. Lots of groups that basically wanted to not be a part of India. Then, of course, what we then begin to see is a long period from 1990 onwards, following decades of movements, both political as well as armed, against the idea of the accession to India, with the Indian government enforcing the draconian Armed Forces Special Powers Act, during which period you had lots of atrocities, come the armed forces for the activities that they carried out over there. And one story that comes out of this is that within Indian federalism, the idea of having states such as those that exist in the Northeast, which have multiple languages, they have multiple ethnic groups, they have multiple histories of existing across the border. So, for example, even if you look at Chakmas, a large population exists on the other side, meaning in Bangladesh, and historical, personal, and social relations that extended to the countries which are formed in 1947, which basically create a very strong separation between people on one side and people on the other side, and a very cynical history of politics coming out of New Delhi. So, for example, and today we see this happening in the case of the BJP, but you see that even before, parties that were in the center, more or less arm-twisted parties that won elections in the Northeast, to somehow become part of a coalition. What that has effectively done is two things. One is that it has created a majoritarian politics in the area. Whichever group is larger effectively bosses groups which are smaller. Secondly, what has also happened is, and I think Tara talked about the fact that her mother is Meitei. Obviously, there was a lot of cross relationships between these groups, but as majoritarian politics has come to the center, what has also happened is that there is a strong feeling to separate majority and minority, and if possible, by force. Third, because of the fact that the BJP wanted to have complete power over this area, they promised everything to everyone. Promises that were not going to be kept. It was not possible, it seems to me, to have made the kind of promises they did to each group and then to expect that these promises would have been carried out. So, with all of these things as the background, one of the things that Tara said towards the end, let us return to politics. Unfortunately, what we see in Manipur is the complete substitution of politics by violence. And the violence itself is taking place at 3 or 4 different levels. So she mentioned 2 groups, which are basically personal militias, and they are also vigilante organizations. And imagine that in contemporary India, and not only in the Northeast, violent vigilante groups have been basically given part of the monopoly of violence that normally resides with the state. And therefore, there's a large amount of impunity that exists with respect to vigilante violent groups, that they are basically under the control of 1 or 2 strong people. In the case of Manipur, with respect to Biren that there is a large amount of impunity that they're given for unspeakable acts of violence. We have seen, those of us who follow the Northeast, we have seen violence against women, violence against entire communities, burning of houses, large-scale displacement, burning of places of worship, and effectively the distribution of state arms to vigilante groups. We have also seen a very large disinformation campaign. So, for example, while all of this is going on, those of us who are on Indian social media have been flooded with messages that this is a good thing that Biren Singh is doing because Naga and Kuki-Zo people are connected to heroin trade coming in from Burma, and that somehow China is behind all of this. So that basically, once the drug trade and the presence of China has been put on the table, that basically has one function, which is to legitimize the use of excessive violence by state forces and by vigilante groups and by private militia. So one thing to think of is what, so you can basically see the large role of disinformation and the large role of social media in terms of creating the consent in the Indian sort of mainland, if you want to call it that, in with relation to continuation of violence, large scale disinformation that basically then also gets amplified by your main television channels in India. I cannot remember that there has been even one show on any Hindi or English language television which has not been extremely pro Biren Singh. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Biren Singh has tendered his resignation because there was going to be a vote of no confidence. And this is, I think, the first person in the history of the BJP of the last 20 years to have actually tendered a resignation. One has to ask, what was the BJP's central leadership expecting Biren Singh to do that he failed in doing, given the fact that all impunity, permissions to create a civil war-like situation over the space of months, and to carry out large-scale violence and displacement, how this would have worked out in favor of the BJP, it really defies, it seems to be any kind of explanation. Now, Tara said, home is where the heart is. And of course, that is true. But I would also like to quote a song which says, home is where the hatred is. And unfortunately, there is a lot of hatred among people who have otherwise lived intimately and in close relationships in not just Manipur, but in many other parts of the country as well. What is the home to which one will return after months of displacement and not just disagreement, but the kind of armed violence that we saw? Can that home be healed? And if that is the case, then what kind of mechanisms must be put into the process of healing? Can it be healed with the BJP in power in the center, which has allowed for this to happen, and also for the politics of majoritarianism that it has unleashed? And I think that these are open questions. I don't want to say that these things will not happen or cannot happen. As we know from the history of the Northeast, very thorny and long-standing problems, including movements for independence from India, have happened in the past. They have also been long civil war and conflict with the Indian state, those kinds of processes. But also there has been reconciliation. But it seems to me that in order for there to be a process of reconciliation, there has to be the building of trust, and there has to be the feeling that the central government is in some ways an honest broker in the disputes that have arisen. Where we will go from here, I think I'm not the right person or qualified enough to say. So I'm hoping that some of our next speakers will be able to point us in the direction of where we can go from this bloody history of the last several months. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I guess that really puts in perspective the wider context to the subcontinent, what's happening. And just for people, There is near the food store, there's money being collected for children in camps. So donate if you can. And we're going to move on to the next speaker. Is Professor Swan from University of Hyderabad. He's the former head of the Department of Political Science, and he's going to talk more about he's going to talk more about the history and like the context specific to Manipur. So could you speak?
Yeah, I can speak. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I hope I'm audible. Yeah. All right. Let me first of all thank the Indian Labour Solidarity Unao ME Welfare Society London, the Dalit Panthers, and all the organizers, and the South Asia Institute at SOAS, the director, Professor Sinha, and all of you there, both offline as well as online, who joined from different places. Thanks for this opportunity and this privilege to lay bare, some of the points that I think are important to ground this mass violence that has broken out for the last over 21 months in Manipur since May 2023. So I think one of the ways in which we can see this is in terms of the long-term attempt to sidestep and dissolve existing institutional arrangement during the colonial and the post-colonial time, which recognize the historical distinctiveness of the hill tribal communities on the one side and the valley communities. I think this is important to underline because the first institutional setup that was put in place during the colonial times, 1835, the political agency, was essentially to regulate the Métis Kingdom, which is based in the valley, with the hill territories, especially in the southern territory, which remained undemarcated, ill-defined till around 1894, when for the first time the border in the south was defined, and subsequently the Valley Kingdom, in effect, increasingly incorporate much of the hill communities, which you now known as the hill areas of Manipur. So since 1835, when the political agency was established to regulate the unruly relations, there was this British political agent which was at the helm of affairs, which would try to pacify the unruly, southern tribes, which has established a state system, what we call the local state system, as it were, based in what we now known as the Sin Hills of Myanmar, right? But those were fuzzy territories for most of the 19th century, and the politics of state building in Manipur also resonate much of the larger politics and history of state making, not only in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and much part of the world, in which the core valley-based kingdoms increasingly incorporate the peripheral, marginal areas within the state system, and as a result of which you have a silencing of many of these tribal territories over time. So in the very process of state making as well as state expansion, a system of conflict, a system of confrontation has been embedded into the process of state making itself, which in effect also got reinforced for the first time around 1907, when the then political agent William Shakespeare drafted the colonial administrative scheme for the hill areas, where the idea of Manipur Darbar was envisioned. And remember that this was done, around a decade of the British establishment of its colonial rule in Manipur after the defeat of the Meitei because of internal rebellion and the successful separation of that rebellion. The Darbar system was established in order to provide a scheme of administration. And when 1907 this idea was mooted, one of the consideration of the British officers then was to set up a scheme, separate scheme of administration for the field areas on the premise that the past cruel dealings of the Meitei kings with the hill communities would not merit allowing the kings to continue their control and rule over the hill areas, and therefore the vice president of Darbar, who is usually elected from the British civil service officer, was put in charge exclusively of the hill affairs as well as the revenue administration. And that in effect lays down the blueprint of the 1947 pre-Indian constitution, drafting of Manipur constitution. Remember that Manipur became a constitutional monarchy, the first in the whole of South as well as Southeast Asia, drafted its own constitution, and it recognized, for example, a separate hill administration regulation, which in effect codified as well as institutionalized the colonial distinctive institutional arrangement for the hill areas, which practically means that the Valley Kingdom or the Valley-based constitutional monarchy would not have any direct control over the administrative affairs pertaining to the village affairs or the jurisdiction of criminal as well as civil matters, because there will be different hill courts which would take care of adjudicating any conflict that arise from the hill areas. So in that sense, you could see a continuum in the colonial and the post-colonial institutional arrangement which underpinned hill areas autonomy when Manipur become a union territory in 1963. You have the Hill Area Standing Committee, which was established along the lines of the Scottish model in the UK, which was kind of offered by Jawaharlal Nehru as the Scottish model, which in the UK is still today known as the West Lothian question, whereby the 7 member of Parliament represented in the Westminster would veto any matters pertaining to the Scottish affairs. But in Manipur, the Hill Area Standing Committee was a diluted form of that Scottish model, simply because it simply was invested with recommendatory or advisory powers on matters pertaining to the hill areas. And this is the larger institutional context in which you have a more or less symbolic autonomy, which in effect govern the administration of the hill areas, which took another form in 1971 through the insertion of Article 371C, where the Constitution of India recognized that there would be Hill Areas Committee drawn from the 20 members of the Hill members of Legislative Assembly in the 60-member Manipur Assembly, and any scheduled matters pertaining to the hill areas would have to be necessarily vet as a matter of legislative procedure, which in effect has often been breached in practice. And this is an important institutional pedigree, which in effect has to be underlined carefully here, because one of the very powerful reasons of the systemic, or what you call the structural source of this violence, is a sense of pervasive relative deprivation both in the hills as well as in the valley, that existing institutional arrangement continue to be inadequate and awfully insufficient to safeguard their rights, especially on matters pertaining to control and ownership over land and resources. And the grounds of the valley community is that because of a distinctive institutional regime which governed ownership and control of land ownership, there has been an incessant wave of demographic pressures exerted on the valley areas. And unless the valley areas are given access to control and ownership of land in the hill territories, because hill territories occupy 90% of the state territorial space. And they consider this as one of the systemic, source of injustice, which continue to deprive majority of the population, given that 53% of Manipur population are concentrated in the valley areas, principally the Métis population, as it were. I think this is one context that we have to bear in mind, which lays down the blueprint of relative deprivation and how populist leadership, in effect, exploit this pervasive sense of relative deprivation to pursue an aggressive project to, kind of perforce their greed and access and control over resources. And one of the manifestation of these could be found in the form of two indigenous, vigilante organization or organization that was established around 2012. And this is important to underline precisely because 2 years before the formation of two indigenous organization as a part of that strategic essentialist project to revive the indigenous glorious past of the Métis Kingdom based in the valley areas, namely the Joint Committee on Inner Line Permit System, and the second is the Scheduled Tribe Demand Committee Manipur, which in effect come out with a series of mobilization to salvage the territorial integrity of Manipur Valley Kingdom from incessant wave of demographic threat coming, as it were, from across the border. And this is also interesting because for the first time, there is inward turn in the demographic discourse in Manipur. No longer the Marwaris, no longer the Biharis were blamed as the major source of demographic threat. For the first time, these Métis-based organization targeted exclusively the Kukis as illegal immigrants who have demographic threat to the territorial integrity of Manipur. And one of the ways to salvage this is to expand the territorial space by claiming right and ownership over access and control over land ownership. So the demand for settled tribe for the Manipuris or the Métis, in effect, is driven not so much by their interest in securing more protective, affirmation policies for the Métis in terms of having reservation in jobs or employment or in terms of representation, but in terms of their naked desire and greed to have direct control over land and resources in the hill territories. And this is a very interesting development because around 2010, the government of Manipur, along with government of India, signed MOU with a natural gas, multinational corporation called Jubilant Energy Private Limited, based in Netherlands, to exploit, natural gas, which is thought to be free floating on the Indo-Myanmar borderland. And remember that the Indo-Myanmar borderland, much part of which is now lying in the Kuki-Zomi Mar dominated areas, are flush with natural gas as well as petroleum deposits. And this is an extension of what is called the Arakan-Burmese Basin. And in that sense, it is one of the most fertile natural gas and oil deposits in the world. And very interestingly, lo and behold, around 2010, 17 out of the 32 oil fields, natural gas oil fields in the Kuki-Zomi Mar dominated areas are found in these areas in Churachandpur and in Farzol. Remember that Farzol was a district which was newly created in December 2006, which was hitherto an integrated part of the Churachandpur. Remember that 17 out of the 32 natural gas fields are supposed to be lying there. And this is the time in which you have many of these multinational corporation, big business, corporate capital, who are increasingly interested with the rise and consolidation of the BJP. According to one report, the Adani Group has also an eye on this. And by 2017, when the Jubilant Energy withdrew from the scene because of a lot of internal as well as other factors, the oil field in Manipur was an open field for open grab by these powerful corporate business bodies. And you can well imagine that this is the time in which you have the rise and consolidation of a populist leadership under Biren Singh. And initially in 2017, when Biren Singh formed his government, it was a minority government. It had to be dependent on the support of its coalition partners, especially the Nagas People's Front, the nationalists, the National People's Party, the ZDU, so and so forth. And because of the compulsion of coalition politics, he engaged in a kind of inclusionary politics by trying to bridge, the Hills Valley divide by emphasizing on Tsingmi, Tammi, Amatani, which essentially means that the Hills and the Valley people are one. And he held a series of cabinet meeting in the Hill Station as to reinforce his inclusive approach to bridging the Hills Valley divide. But once he stabilized himself towards the later part of his first term, and by the second stint in 2022, when new elections come, he could consolidate himself because the BJP was able to capture 32 seats out of the 60 assembly constituency. And this is the time when Biren Singh consolidated himself in power. He, in fact, began to pursue aggressively a majoritarian assimilationist politics, which is, in effect, interested in having direct access and control of tribal territories. And that is precisely where you find around October 2022, for the first time, for example, the Churachandpur Khopum Protected Forest Reserve, which encompass something like 38 villages covering around 500 square kilometers, litigate before the Assistant Settlement Officer, and the Assistant Settlement Officer as empowered under Indian Forest Act 1927. In effect, having heard the matter from 1971 to 1988, remember that this Kopum Churachandpur Protected Reserve Forest was declared in 1966, and there were open litigation from the chiefs because they thought that it was unfair and unjust for their villages to be included without their explicit consent. And as a result of this representation, 24 of the villages, which encompass something like 470 out of the 500 areas, in effect, were excluded. But Biren Singh's government cabinet arbitrarily, neutralized those exclusion and went on a very aggressive anti-encroachment drive, which culminated in the February 20 eviction of a particular village in Churachandpur by sending the bulldozer to decimate the whole village structure there in Sonjang. So since then, there was this tension palpable building up, and by around April 11, 2023, you have the demolition of 3 churches predominantly owned by the Paite, by the Zhou, as well as the Roman Catholic, which is essentially a conglomerate of the Kuki Zomi Mar groups, at the heart of Imphal, on the pretext that they were constructed on illegal land, which despite the fact that they have the Dak Chitha, which is a land deed document, in open flout of the public premise eviction Act of 1971, which in effect prohibit demolition of any public building after sunset or before sunrise. Again, bulldozer was sent. Hardly 4 to 5 hours of prior notification given. The charge takers were not given opportune time, sufficient time to take out the goods and belongings of the church, and the result of which was that there was a lot of disenchantment, frustration, and anger built against what the tribal people would call it as lawless law enforcement. And this all culminated in the March 2027, and along with this, you have March 27 Manipur High Court order, which in effect, kind of trying to impress upon Manipur government to take a call on Métis tribe for a tribe union demand for settled tribe. And this is when you have the old Tribal Student Union Manipur, which is a conglomerate of all tribal organizations, not just the Kuki, Zomi, Mar groups, but also different Naga tribal organizations, went and undertook different protest against a possible sanction of or recognition of the Métis as settled tribe, you have a selective targeting of these people who in effect, after having done the peaceful protest in Churachandpur, were reportedly waylaid, and which led to the escalation of violence in the evening of May 3rd, 2023. And the ramification of this could be felt very, very atrociously at around 55 to 60 kilometers in Imphal, the heart of Manipur's capital, which Tara has thus, reported to you. And one of the, therefore, paradox, therefore, is that had it not been for institutionalized, riots, had it not been for the full complicity of the state, had it not been for the partisan role of the state in selectively preparing down the way for whipping up emotions, whipping up hate, whipping up, a selective tarnishing of the image of a population, and mobilizing vigilante groups, including Arambai Tengol as well as Meitei Lipund, to in effect prepare the stage for this violent outbreak since May 3rd, you would not have this scale of violence. And this scale of violence cannot be explained away precisely because it has lasted, was rather allowed to persist for over 21 months, despite the overwhelming presence of central paramilitary force. And according to one estimate, the estimate are between 30,000 to 60,000 additional paramilitary force. Why is it not that the Indian state, powerful Indian state, the double engine Sarkar, not been effective enough despite the claim of Amit Shah, the Home Minister in the Parliament in early August 2024, that the state government was cooperating with the central government in trying to establish law and order? There is something which is difficult to explain, and that is why some of us take this position of borrowing the works of Paul Brass in the context of North India, where communal violence were allowed to happen for vested political interests. And this is a classic textbook example of another institutionalized riot system which unraveled before us. And had it not been for the complicity and partisan role of the state, the large scale of violence, which has taken the lives of 223 Kuki, Zomi, Mar lives till today, 200 villages burned down, 7,000, more than 7,000 houses torched, over 60,000 displaced, and more than 360 churches burned down, which also exemplify that there is a lot of atrocities committed against the Kuki, Zomi, Mar tribal communities because of their religious denomination as well as persuasion. The kind of ground report that we also have is that it's not just the Kuki, Zomi, or Mar group which are targeted, it's also the Métis Christians who are targeted violently, and almost all the churches are razed to the ground, and many of them have been brought back into what is often called in India today as the Ghar Vapasi, what is called the return back home, which in a sense also tells us the complex and complicated nature of this violence, in the sense that you have a particular form of strategic essentialism that indigenous politics that currently underway in Manipur try to kind of get appropriated by the larger Hindu nationalist narrative by trying to arraign all conflict, all violence in Manipur to the act of what is called the conspiracy of Christian, which have transnational affiliation. So by projecting the Kuki, Zomi, Mar groups as a part of this Christian transnational cartel, which is interested in, in stabilizing the Indian state, posing grave threat to domestic as well as national security, you have continual vilification program, which was unleashed by targeting the Kuki, Zomi, Mar groups as illegal immigrants, as narco-terrorists, as illegal encroachers, so and so forth, when it is evident that the actual ground statistics tells you that it is not just the Kukis or Myanmar who are, peddlers of drugs across the border. All communities, including the Métis, including the Métis Pangals, the Muslim communities, or the Nagas, are also implicated in these cross-border drug trades. So in that sense, it is a lopsided as well as distorted narrative which is conveniently used and exploited by populist leaders, the former chief minister and his cartel, to kind of perpetuate and justify violence, which also suggests the institutionalized nature of this violence, which in a sense also tells you that not only the ground was prepared, but also the post facto justification was in effect invoked in terms of narrative justification, which you can still have it today. So what is the consequences? Just in 2 minutes, one of the consequences is that this violence is unprecedented because for the first time, you never have the full complicity and partition role of the state, which is in naked display. And one of the important, in fact, evidence to suggest is the leaked tape, whereby the chief minister, the former chief minister, was allegedly, giving self-incriminating claim that he played a central role in starting and perpetuating this violence to protect Métis Zati, Métis community, as well as the territorial integrity of the state. So in that sense, the complicity and partition role of the state is implicated, which also entails that you have a complete demographic as well as territorial separation between the Kuki, Zomi, Mar group on the one side, which is in effect more or less institutionalized and solidified for over 21 months with the idea of buffer zones. Remember that these buffer zones are terms or terminology that you'd only come across in some of the most deadly conflict between states, independent sovereign states, not domestic, national security problem. This is the first time in post-independent India's history that you have the perpetuation of buffer zones in which strict line of territorial demarcation had to be guarded by central paramilitary force, and any incursion on either side would invite, the wrath of the community, the lynching or the speedy extermination of communities. And these are in effect unprecedented. And therefore, which in effect over a protected period of time drastically erode the trust and legitimacy of the Manipur state as well as the Indian state, because the communalized nature of the police force, of the deficit of trust in the Indian state and its central paramilitary force, suggests that much of this law and order enforcement are outsourced to vigilante as well as armed groups for 21 years, which in effect radicalize the insurgency complex in Manipur. And that is the terrible mess that the BJP has placed Manipur in. Had the president rule been invoked earlier, all of these outsourcing of law and order machinery to vigilante and armed groups would not have taken place. At least a semblance of trust and legitimacy of the state would have been restored by now. And one of the formidable challenges, therefore, is how do you then establish what Michael Mann, the eminent political sociologist, called the infrastructural power of the state? If the state were to restore and regain its trust and legitimacy across the divide, then it has to autonomously regulate, state-society relation by establishing trust in the institution. And the third implication of this is that when there is a pervasive territorial and demographic, separation for the last 21 months, remember that all the Kuki Zomi Mar communities are deprived of direct access to Imphal airport for these 21 months, which also entailed humanitarian disaster because there were many critical patients who were deprived of having access to hospitality and other services in some of the key hospitals in Imphal, because the kind of infrastructural development is so lopsided that much of the cutting-edge hospital and critical care are concentrated in the Imphal Valley areas. And the result of which is that there is unprecedented or unacceptable level of human tragedy which unfold thanks to the 21 months of protracted violence. How do you then convince communities across the divide not to pursue what we call the separate administration demand? And my contention is that if Manipur's territorial integration is protagonist, defenders of Manipur territorial integrity are so serious in protecting Manipur territorial integrity, unless they in effect immediately shunned this majoritarian assimilationist project of dissolving existing institutional distinctive arrangement in the hills and the valley, I don't see any possible way out, whatever. But the big question is that would, after having relentlessly being dehumanized, being launched with a series of genocidal attacks. Remember that one of the popular lyricists based in the valley, who composed under the nickname of Tapta, in effect, composed this song, which was released sometime in July 7th, 2023. And his song was very, very popular, but has a very disturbing implication. And what he says is that what we are interested is establishing a homeland. Even if the army restored, a semblance of peace, he says the Métis will not rest until all the cookies are killed, which essentially means that there is a pervasive penetration of these hate crimes of genocidal intent inscripted in the psyche of a large segment of the population who has been mobilized and radicalized over a period of 21 months. So what is the challenge facing before us is that can presidents rule and in effect detoxify some of this radicalized ultra-nationalist poison which is unmindful of the historical distinctiveness of a shared history and culture, given that Manipur, like most other Indian states, is a composite state. It is historically a process in a process of evolving and incorporation of territories. And unless you respect or affirm the historical institutional setup which govern both hills and valley community and try to flatten and homogenize that, I think it is a sure recipe for disaster. And I think that is precisely the challenge that we have to take on board. I'll stop here. I have spoken quite a bit. So thank you once again for your patient hearing. I hope it opens up some ideas for you to engage in a Q&A session.
Yeah, that was. Am I speaking on the phone?
No, I think it's laptop. Yeah. Just give it the laptop.
Do I have to do the slide thing myself?
No, he's gonna open this.
Do I start?
Yeah, stop.
Do I need to be nearby? Can you hear me? Can people on line hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. Please go ahead. Yeah.
They said yes. Oh, nice. Maybe you listen. You listen and then you do according to it. Yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Lun Fitton. I'm from Una Welfare UK.
I'm going to come straight to the point. We don't have much time. So I lost my aunt, Gozavung, who was 58 years, and my cousin, her only son, Golal Sang, who was 27 then, to mob attacks on May 4, 2023 in Imphal. It's like the day after the night of Dr. Tara's ordeal. I'm one of countless families who have lost loved ones, homes, villages, and places of worship. Today, when we look through parts of Manipur on Google Map, we see flattened and burned lands where our houses, villages, and churches used to be. 53 of our dead remained unattended and unclaimed for over 7 months. They were stuck in hospital morgues located in Imphal, which is the capital of Manipur. My aunt and cousin were among them. Only with the intervention of the Indian Army could we retrieve their remains to give them a respectable mass burial in December. So the drawn image on our event poster is that of one of the mass burials that we did back in December. Taking emergency shelter at a relative's house on the night of May 3, the next morning, 7 members of my family, including my aunt, Gozavung, her daughter, Zamngai Kim, who was 24 years then, her son, Golal Sang, and his young bride, Nancy Tingtian Nyang, who is 27 then, drove for refuge towards a nearby CRPF camp in Lamphel in Imphal. A mob of over 100 blocked their path and pulled them out of the car. They were subjected to insults and questions about their identity and their ethnicity before the mob separated them. Golal Sang was chased, encircled, and attacked with rods, stones, and bricks. His mum positioned herself between the attackers and him, but they cheered and continued the attacks until both died in broad daylight. Nancy, my sister-in-law, was paraded to a different place where the women folk, known as the Meira Paibis, shouted to the others to rape her. She was left to die with severe head injuries and fractured wrists and fingers, but miraculously survived to tell her ordeal. Khamson, my one-year-old nephew, who was in the arms of another aunt, was not spared either. He was slapped many times. His parents tell me he still wakes up in the middle of the night screaming and shaking. The same day, in another part of Imphal, Olivia Tongloy, who is 21 years, and Florence Hang Sing, 24, who worked at a car wash, were locked in a room by a mob. Young men entered the room and tortured them. A news report said co-workers could hear their screams and pleas for like 2 hours. When the room was opened, it was filled with the blood and hair of the victims. The naked parade of 2 tribal women, which shocked the nation and the entire world, also happened on the same day. Neng Kholun, the 19-year-old younger brother of one of the women, was killed trying to protect her. And her father was killed in front of her eyes. On June 4, 7-year-old Tonsing Hang Sing, his mother Mina, and her friend Lydia Lorembam were burned alive in an ambulance on their way to the hospital. They were killed despite the mother being Meitei, only because the father is tribal. On the night of November 7, 2024, in an unprovoked attack on a tribal village by Meitei militants, Zo Sang Kim Har, a 31-year-old mother of 3 young children, was shot in the leg and could not escape. Witness says she begged her husband to take the children to safety because she couldn't move. Her charred remains were discovered the next morning with the brain membrane next to it. Post-mortem report reveals she was tortured and allegedly raped before she was set on fire. We have no clear information about any arrests for these atrocities and many others that I have no time to share today. The attacks on us continue unabated to this day on all fronts. We cannot set foot in Imphal, and we're cut off from accessing the only airport which connects us to other states of India. The name of the airport is Bir Tikenderji International Airport. For me, what normally takes probably a day and a half to reach my hometown Lamka will now take me at least 4 days. I will have to fly from here to New Delhi, from New Delhi to Aizawl in Mizoram, and from Aizawl, I will need to take the under construction National Highway 102B, which is a rugged mountainous road of 331.9 kilometers. On Google Map, it will say that it will take us 11 hours, but in reality, it's usually between 17 and 20 hours. That is, if there is no landslide, which is landslide all the time. This national highway is the only safe route and lifeline for all the needs of my community, as Professor Swan explained very well. There is now a clear physical and emotional divide between communities that have lived together for centuries. In the hill districts where I come from, over 45,000 internally displaced are sheltering in temporary relief camps, using schools, church halls, and other public buildings. These camps are supported by local civil society organizations, crowdfunding, like we're doing now, or philanthropists and neighboring states, including Mizoram. We have minimal support from the Manipur state government. More than 75 of us have succumbed to diseases in these camps, and living conditions are dismal with shortage of food, medicines, and other essentials. I'd like to finish with a short clip of a typical relief camp, if there is time. Yeah. That's my time once this ends. Thank you. No. Huh? Not this one. No, this is the first one. The I think slide 7, 8. Yeah, that one. Does it have some? Yeah, please. This is taken by the relief camp in charge on her phone, so it's a bit shaky. Yes, there is a report. There is a report on that, isn't there?
Yeah, we produced a report about this, looking at mainly at India, Kashmir, and Pakistan. But we didn't have the material on Manipur at the time, so we're going to be expanding the report on it. So if anyone's interested in the campaign, and obviously like there's a lot we can do here to target JCP. Every time you target JCP, you raise also the issue of racism.
Yes, yes. That's for the General Secretary to chat with you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Are they not hearing?
We can't hear most of the question. The only one that I could gather from here is the one in the box by ILS. The question was about JCB complicity in the violence. There is campaign to build pressure here. Yeah, you see, one of these problem that is unleashed by the use of JCB or the bulldozer, we call it, was what is often called as the lawless law enforcement. Because in the first place, if any eviction of public premises, according to the 1971 Act, were to be enforced, it is important for a prior notification of at least 21 days. And once that period lapses, there would be a period of, representation, which is inevitably implicit in that 21 days period. And after which, depending upon the outcome, and if actual demolition were to happen, it cannot take place after sunset or before sunrise, according to the Public Premise Eviction of Buildings Act 1971. But what happened in the demolition of the three churches on 11 April in Imphal was that it happened around 3:30, 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning. clearly before sunrise, which essentially does not, in effect, fulfill firstly the requirement of the law that there has to be adequate, sufficient time for the victim to make the appeal before the appropriate authority so that their case would be disposed of. So in that sense, it is evident that there is a clear, aggressive, undue haste in selectively targeting communities. And remember, this also become very stark because this demolition of the church, for example, in Imphal, had happened in light of the state of Gujarat versus Union of India case 2009, whereby the Supreme Court directed all state government to review construction of places of worship which do not comply with, the document requirement, which has to be furnished necessarily before the legitimate public authority. And unlike the tribal communities, 188 Meitei temples were regularized after this review happened. And not a single tribal church were regularized in light of this instruction by the Supreme Court, which also reinforced the partisan nature of the state in discriminating, the tribal population and the valley-based Meitei population. And the way in which this was ruthlessly as well as lawlessly enforced without following established procedure reinforced that the state is not interested in the rule of law, but in a very problematic interpretation which relentlessly target communities. And that is precisely why I think this type of lawless law enforcement also play up to the rule book of what Paul Brass in the context of North India called an institutionalized riot system, because it prepared the ground for a lot of disenchantment, frustration, disgruntlement against the established order, so that any event which trigger violent activities can, in effect, take, uncontrolled turn. And that is precisely why there is this problematic issue involved in that. What is the way forward? I think the way forward, I somehow try to outline this in today's Hindu paper that I wrote as one of the opinion piece in the Hindu from the Delhi edition, which is that given the deep psychological as well as physical divide, I have already told that because of this 21 months of violence, there is a complete territorial rupture between the hills and the valley community, especially the Kuki Zongmi groups on the one side, and the Meitei, because neither of the sides could, in effect, go to either side across the buffer zone, right? And the result of which is that because preceding to this violence in 2016, the territorial borders of the state had been redrawn to further, push the ethnicization of district territories. It is now increasingly becoming clear that ethnic boundaries coincide with district boundaries. So one of the possible pathways that I think is maybe if the, large mobilization, radical mobilization, which is no longer willing to have any sensibility or sensitiveness to give decentralized autonomy to the hill areas, which is an upgraded status of the existing arrangement under Article 371C, an existing district council, I think Manipur has possibly reached a point of no return. But as the literature on institutional change suggests, as an academic, I'll see that these institutional change, including border change and upgradation of demand to encompass a separate administration, would have to navigate complex and contested political terrain of negotiation as well as politically negotiated settlement. And given that the BJP-led central government take a position which is in alignment with the majority Meitei population that territorial integrity of Manipur cannot be compromised, looks like so long as the BJP is in power in the central government, there is no likelihood of conceding the demand for separate state administration demand for the Kokizomi community. That's one. Then what is the best bet for us to, establish a semblance of closure to this unacceptable atrocity of violence is what is often called the spirit of justice, of trust, of infrastructural power of the state. I think unless the state restore back infrastructural power of the state, which is to establish trust and legitimacy of the state and its institution, any kind of solution is likely to be blackmailed by potential spoilers on the ground. And that is where I thought that it is imperative before a political solution is offered that the state must, in effect, overcome its partisan interest and complicity or open alignment with a particular community. And the central political leadership, which is committed to a particular cultural nationalist position, should also realize that the national level cultural nationalist position does not work in complex, polarized or what I call pillarized segmented societies like Manipur. Precisely because what we have seen over the last 21 months is that given the radicalization of this Métis indigenous politics, which is controlled by ultra-nationalists, which are secessionists, remember that this institutional ecosystem is controlled by proscribed Métis organizations, which are considered unlawful under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967, amended in 2014, precisely because they have contested persistently the territorial merger of Manipur Kingdom with the Indian Union in 1948. And that is what Professor Sinha has raised in his presentation as well. And given that this problematic contested nature of merger between the Indian state and Manipur Kingdom continue to be stalemated because of contestation from these ultra-nationalists, chances are that this indigenous politics, which seeks to revive the glorious past of Manipur Kingdom, that is Kangleipak, would fall in the hands of secessionist, elements, which would pose the gravest national security threat to the Indian state. And the most gravest threat to Indian security, therefore, would lies not so much from the Kuki, Zomi, or Mar as has been projected, but from somewhere else. So therefore, I think the central government should open its eye and hear seriously, the kind of internal intelligence input that they must have received from ground level military intelligence as well as intelligence bureau who are very active on the ground. And the third is that in order to build trust and legitimacy, I think the state, both the central as well as the state government, should whoever continue to be at the helm of affairs should realize that deeply divided societies like Manipur cannot hold together unless you recognize and respect institutional accommodation, which has been historically given and conceded to during the colonial as well as the post-colonial times as well. So unless there is a formation and a commitment to strengthen existing institutional arrangement, which in effect accommodate or process autonomy demands of tribal communities, not just Kuki, Zomi, and Mar communities, but also the Naga communities, I do not see that Manipur territorial integrity would be an easy proposition to be upheld, much against the dislike of the majoritarian and integrationist Métis today. So I think the future lies in accommodation of the distinctive needs and demands of the Kuki, Zomi, as well as Mar groups, but also there is also interesting proposition, which is that you should also be attentive to the kind of opacity or inadequacy in existing institution governing representation, as well as reservation of jobs, as well as employment across the states in the valley areas. There is a lot of lack of information or transparency about which political group or which social group got, politically accommodated and got empowered. And because of this opacity and intransparency embedded in the system, there is a lot of pervasive in a fluid political space, which is usually appropriated by this vigilante organization to appropriate those, pervasive relative grievances as well as sense of deprivation for their populist politics, which is not always good. And that is precisely why in today's paper in the Hindu, I outlined, for example, that there is this unusual resonance of Nazi rule during the 1930s when some of these overzealous Nazis, in their commitment to protect the purity of the German Aryan race and to secure the Third Reich, from the unwanted Jewish others, in effect, throw the whole of Germany and, for that matter, large part of Europe into the Holocaust, right? And I think this dangerous portents, which was evident in the 1930s, have this unusual resonance in the current spate of violence in Manipur, which we should resolve never to feed in the future. And I think unless and until we, in effect, oriented a political culture as well as political socialization, which, in effect, avoid or resisted that type of toxic or, deeply contested politics, I don't see any future possibility of peace, stability in Manipur, even if we live as neighbor under different political roof. So I think it is open to negotiation, but I think it is complex and multi-layered, and it depends upon the important stakeholders on both sides of the divide to competently, navigate this. And I think given that Article 3 has given a near unilateral power to the central government, that is the parliament, to redraw boundaries, I think it is up to the parliament, wisdom of the parliament, to decide when it can say at the end of the day that an oppressive rule of one dominant community is not permissible, and therefore, as an escape route, a separate administration is merited. We do not know what is going to happen, but what we can have at hand, therefore, is how do you then build trust? How do you then build legitimacy of the state and institution which take care of the opaque and intransparent system of representation, of reservation of access to jobs as well as employment opportunities, in order to at least
Sorry,
ameliorate,
Professor, we've been asked to
this deep divide
finish.
across communities in Manipur. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Praveen, I have taken quite a bit to explain.
Making this space in allowing us to have this platform to tell our story. Really appreciate that. Thank you to Amrit from South Asia Solidarity. Right, yes. It's been a while since I've seen you. It was, I think, the protest that I last saw you. But thank you for continuing to support us and the way that you have guided us in so many ways. I really appreciate that. And UK Zokhate, I don't think they're here, but they have been really supportive for us as well, throughout this conflict. But lastly, and most importantly, thank you for showing up this afternoon. I know there are lots of stories with even worse, may I say, happening around the world, but you have lent us your ear, and for us, a burden shared is a burden halved, and for that we are really thankful. I do hope you enjoyed a little bit of the snack that was being provided, and thank you for your time once again. Have a great rest of the evening. Thank you.
all for coming, especially thank you for Nalva for coming and like sharing what's been going on and like the urgency of why we're here. And like there's a couple of actions we want people to do.
So can I just
yeah.
And obviously, thank the panels and the obvious ones. I forgot to thank the panels. Dr. Tara Martin, Professor Kompan, Professor Subir, who's left already, and also Ruben Fitton for your contribution this evening. So thank you.
So we want people to write to your MPs, for more people to know and for more people to be aware of what's going on, and definitely that contact it's really urgent, and follow us on our socials.
Now you can leave.
Thank you so much. Take care. Sorry, it's a bit late in India. Thank you.